We're joined in our Firehouse studio by Jordan Flaherty, an organizer with the New Orleans Network, longtime activist and editor of Left Turn magazine. Jordan was in New Orleans when the hurricane hit in August. He returned to the city soon after being evacuated to help with relief efforts and to report on what was happening in the streets, particularly in poor Black communities that were most affected by the hurricane. Jordan, talk about on-the-ground efforts right now in New Orleans, the different groups and the different issues.
I feel like I learned a lot about what community means by living in New Orleans, and there's a lot of amazing organizers, folks from what I would say is the Ella Baker School of Organizing, who came up out of that movement and have inspired me so much and taught me so much. Great organizers that work with the People's Hurricane Relief Fund, Common Ground Collective, Insight Women of Color Against Violence is starting a Women of Color Resource Center. Really amazing organizers who are doing really fabulous work, and folks from around the country who have come to support us. And that is what we need, because we were let down by the federal government, by the state government, by local government, by the corporate media. All those folks let us down. I'll tell you who had a fast reaction time is the Heritage Foundation, the right-wing think tank. Within about a week and a half after the hurricane, they put out their agenda, and they said, we need to cut the capital gains tax, we need to cut the inheritance tax, and they also said we need vouchers for schools. They're attacking our school system, they're attacking our healthcare system, they're attacking public housing. It's this whole neoconservative privatization agenda, and we're being hit with it really hard. We had in Louisiana, it might be surprising for people to know, the statewide healthcare system specifically for poor folks, the Charity Hospital system. And Charity Hospital in New Orleans serves 66% of the uninsured folks in the city. That hospital was closed down under Katrina. Doctors went in, cleaned it out. They say the hospital is ready to be opened. The state is not reopening that hospital. The school system, we had 117 schools. There's now just a handful open. Most of them have been charter schools. The vast majority of the teachers have been fired, and it's going to get even worse for them. Housing, there's several thousand units of public housing that were not damaged, and yet they still have not been opened. People are being kept out of public housing. 6 months later, these units still sit empty.
Jordan Flaherty, the color of New Orleans now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing American racism on hyperdrive right now with the mass dispossession of people from New Orleans. I'm white, and most white folks I know are back in New Orleans. Black folks are not back. Right. Even if you compare similarly destroyed neighborhoods like the Lower Ninth and Lakeview, right? Absolutely. Lakeview is mostly white, and people are coming back by and large. People are rebuilding. The Lower Ninth, is not back. And so it's definitely racialized disaster.
And the voting, last week a federal judge ruled against a request for the state of Louisiana to create out-of-state satellite polling places for evacuees temporarily living outside.
I'm not a big believer in electoral politics, but one way that you dispossess people of a city is you take away their voting rights.
What about the prisoners? We were focusing on this a lot after Hurricane Katrina hit. First, what happened to those who were incarcerated at the time that the water was rising in the prisons? But what about where the prisoners are today? Jordan Flaherty.
We still have at least 3,000 that are locked up in maximum security prisons around the state, and these are people who still have not gotten a lawyer, still have not been convicted of a crime. This is the kind of thing we condemn Guantanamo for, right? But it's happening right in Louisiana. In fact, of the 42 public defenders, there's only 7 left right now, and they can't take the cases. In fact, a judge has ruled.
What do you mean only 7 left?
The rest have all been laid off, and those that are left, a lot of them don't have phone service, fax service, the things they need to properly represent their clients. So these people are not getting representation. They don't have any time on the horizon the chance of even having a court hearing. And I want to remind the Law and Order viewers out there that just because someone's been arrested doesn't mean they're guilty. Just because they're convicted doesn't necessarily mean they're guilty. But definitely these folks have not been convicted of any crime. They have not had their day in court. They're just being shuttled off to these prisons. And it breaks my heart. Many of the people who are in misdemeanors have just gotten that now. So these are people who were there for public drunkenness or unpaid parking tickets. They spent several months without getting their day in court.
Where are these prisoners?
They're at Hunt's Prison, Angola Prison, which is a former slave plantation, where 90% of the prisoners there end up dying there. People still do the plantation labor. They still cut sugarcane there at that prison. And that's where far too many young black men from New Orleans have ended up historically. And I want to give a shout out to Safe Streets, Strong Communities, which is a coalition of groups in New Orleans that are working on this issue and organizing on this issue. Organizations like Critical Resistance at criticalresistance.org.
The universities, Tulane opened up, but there were also the historically black colleges that were hit very hard.
One thing that's interesting I want to say about Tulane is 90% of Tulane students came back. Now, people keep saying that we have to be realistic, that New Orleans people don't want to come back, that they won't come back. These students who had much less of a link to the city, they came back because they were welcomed and they were encouraged to come back.
Yeah.
The people of New Orleans have been kept out.
Jordan Flaherty, longtime activist and editor of Left Turn magazine. All the links to the organizations that have been mentioned will be on our website at democracynow.org. And special thanks to Ana Noguera, who is in New Orleans this weekend.